With the popularity of Engage's manga within the fandom, I was compelled to revisit Fire Emblem's older works with manga. The 4 komas for FE, which are essentially gagged manga strips, were the first I visited, which I greatly enjoyed. But I then revisited a manga serialization for Fire Emblem that I think generally gets noticed, but I find many haven't yet taken the time to read yet. With this video, I hope I can convince those who may have not even known or have been putting it on the back burner finally takes a look at the Fire Emblem Fates manga starring Leo as the main focus, with the translated title Fire Emblem If, The Crown of Nibelung, written and illustrated by Yuji Ojitama. To begin, since I suspect many of you already know at least what Fire Emblem Fates is, I want to go over the mangaka real quick, Yuji Ojitama, who is no stranger to manga, as they had many published works previous to The Crown of Nibelung, dating as far back as around 2005. With them primarily targeting a teenage girl to adult woman audience. But with Yuji Oji being chosen as the mangaka for Fates' adaptation, what do I think of the most notable change for this adaptation? That being Leo being the main focus of the story instead of Corrin. I've had rumblings between a small minority of people that characters like Xander, Ryoma, and some other characters would have been potentially a better choice as being the focus if it wasn't Corrin herself. However, I think Leo was the perfect choice for Yuji Oji, as one of their earlier works, Plus C, Sword and Cornet has the protagonist, Belka Nocturcus, a young prince born from a commoner and a king, and of course, not up next in the throne. Are you starting to see the similarities for these two characters? With Leo and Corrin winning their respective categories in the male and female divisions of Japan's popularity poll for the Fates cast, what better character to choose for the mangaka than Leo to make the focus for an adaptation? With that said, the manga itself uses the first 6 chapters of Branch of Fate up till chapter 17 of Rev, and as mentioned earlier, uses Leo as the main point of focus, with it occasionally swapping to Corrin's perspective, especially earlier on. From here on out, I'm going to be spoiling a bit of Rev along with what the manga does that I feel are just very interesting, so if you're already convinced on reading this adaptation, skip ahead, pause, go read the manga. Trust me, if you already like Fates' cast or wish to see more of especially the Norian siblings, I think you're going to enjoy what you see. The manga itself is only 17 chapters, and it won't take too much of your time. With that said, the manga does take quite a few liberties with the source material, many of which either uplifts the story or gives us a peek into Fates' world we otherwise wouldn't have seen. And really what I appreciate about a lot of these changes is that they don't feel unnatural or out of character for anyone. And if it does, I think it's an overall improvement. It takes the base foundation of Fates' cast, personalities, plot, and expands them in a way that feels natural and makes the story a bit more focused and better for a manga format. An example of this earlier on is not only does Xander train Corrin with the motivation for her is to eventually be strong enough to leave the Northern Fortress, but also as a means to defend herself against the Faceless, something that Corrin isn't even aware about in the games. And given how the Faceless in the games has been explained to us to attack even the Norians who made them, it makes perfect sense. And with Leo's perspective being the main focus, we see Leo's jealousy and internal conflict regarding Corrin expanded upon. Of course, the villains have also been tweaked or expanded upon, such as us seeing a little bit of what Garen was like in the past, like how Xander always describes him, giving the reader a pretty clear reason as to why Xander continues believing in his father in the first place. Yagos' character was changed slightly, becoming sort of the main antagonist and focuses far more on his ambitions, and being a bit more serious than how he was portrayed in the Birthright route especially. I also think Yago gets an interesting downfall, as he slowly dies from consuming the dragon blood from Anankos, becoming less and less himself, and more focused on the mission, implying that this may have actually been the way Garen himself died. Honestly, with the masks, I don't want to say it, but if that is not a JoJo's reference, I don't know what is. Speaking of references, they take a page to make a cute reference to the fact that Yagos' name is Macbeth in Japanese. Just like the Shakespearean play, with the manga also using a background character, naming them Macduff, a major character from the play. We also get so much more perspective of Norse culture, issues, perspectives from soldiers, their economy. We also see Corrin used pretty much as war propaganda to lift army morale when she was kidnapped by Hoshido. Things like these, if done many times in a story for a video game, in my opinion, would drastically increase the story length, and I think could curb the overall pace of the story, which is why adaptations and outside media for me has always been great, so we can have material we only get a glimpse of in the games. I think one moment that really stuck with me was Chapter 4, right when Corrin meets Azura. What was used as a way to not only introduce Azura to the player, but as a way for the player to organize their thoughts about the matter within their family, the manga uses this as a way for both parties to talk about what they left behind in their kingdoms. With Corrin realizing that she really does miss her Norian siblings and breaks down. And for Azura, her doll made from her mother, which then gets referenced many chapters in with Camilla in Azura's old room. Attention to detail like this is something that felt constant in the manga, and every new detail with each new read-through made me appreciate both Fates' overall story and the overall execution of the manga's adaptation. While Leo does take much of the focus in the manga, that doesn't mean that other Fates characters don't have screen time. You'll find Odin and Niles having very key roles in the story, with them even proving to Leo that Vala indeed exists, and we see a glimpse of its history that is nowhere in the games. Hell, it's even brought up that even Azura doesn't know about this kind of stuff. The Norian royals, of course, you will find a lot of, especially for Xander and Elise. Camilla gets a little bit less attention, but simply giving her more expressions than the base Fates portraits gives a lot of life to her, and aspects of Camilla's character we only see briefly in the games, I think show up way more often, making people who may have not been appreciative of Camilla's character, I think they might like her a little bit more here. Xander's retainers, especially Laszlo, we see do things like surveying the situation of Norse's resources and how it's all handled. Pieri, we only see like once, but even then we see stuff from her that we never see in the games, such as her castle that Elise was sent to for safety and protection. Heck, in that castle, we see Kaze, the absolute Chad, go out of his way through hell and back just to send a message to Elise from Corrin to help her, which gives Elise a sense of need to help her sisters, just like how she was in Birthright. You'll see many other minor characters as well. Hana and Hayato show up, with Hana interacting with Leo, something we don't actually see in the games because they don't even have supports. And we also see Silas in the background in one panel before he joins up with Corrin in chapter 14. And honestly, using Silas there was far more creative and well thought out than just throwing in a generic soldier. Heck, even Charla and Benny get a page, just talking with each other overseeing a battle. Speaking of the battles, while there isn't that many fights shown, you can see a lot of care went into illustrating and writing them. Corrin's expression when training against Xander, which shocks Leo when seeing it as it felt out of character for her, using a flash flood in order to separate the entire army apart in chapter 6, Leo cutting up his own hand to reveal an invisible Valite soldier. Stuff like this is honestly something you should just see for yourself if you haven't already. In regards for things you should see for yourself, the fact that they give many of the important characters different sets of clothing is something I always appreciate about video game adaptations doing, and this manga does not disappoint. Frankly, it's criminal we haven't gotten much art out of these outfits. Even just doing small things like having Corrin wear a coat or kimono over her regular outfit just gives so much life to the world that logistically wouldn't be possible for the games. If you're an artist and maybe want some inspiration for different outfits for Fates characters, I think you may find a couple to enjoy here. Of course, now, what are my gripes with the manga? I honestly don't have much to say. I do wish it could have just finished the story without it leaving off in essentially a cute cliffhanger explaining that they did indeed succeed against the Nonkos, who looks cool by the way. But perhaps this was done merely to motivate players to get the game to see how it finishes. I also wish we got just a little few more things from Hoshido, but the little stuff we got already, such as how the samurai follow Ryoma's leadership, wishing to avenge Mikoto, and seeing the unique faces on all of them was honestly pretty great. But then focusing on Leo, of course, Nora would get more spotlight, so less material from the Hoshiden side makes sense overall, given the amount of chapters this manga was allotted for. The fan translation also felt odd at times, such as Xander asking what the bottomless canyon was when he 100% knew what that is, but of course, I know what he meant. But it is just a little awkward for me to read, at least personally. But just to stress my point, that's just me nitpicking on otherwise amazing work from the fan translators. The Fates manga overall is just a wonderful adaptation, with love and respect to the story, the lore, characters, themes, everything. As a fan of the game, it's honestly super touching we got an adaptation as good as this one, and I implore any fan of Fire Emblem, Fates or otherwise, go give it a read. If you want a more light-hearted spin of Fire Emblem Fates in a manga-ish format, there is the comic anthology series, which cover all 3 routes in a far more comedic manner, showing shenanigans with the Fates characters along with the 4 Komas, which is basically the same concept but shorter in 4-panel bursts. There is a whole slew of Fire Emblem manga to read through as well. I mentioned the Engage manga at the beginning, which is currently still in serialization with each chapter coming out every month. And literally, not that long ago, as of recording this video, the Thracia 776 manga adaptation finally got its first chapter fan-translated. The FE6 manga, also known as Fire Emblem The Champion Sword, was serialized in Shonen Jump, and one of the few manga I've read from FE that comes to an overall satisfying conclusion with spectacular art with big page spreads. It's one that I would recommend checking out after you read through the Fates manga. With all that, there is something I do need to get off my chest. I need to talk smack about the Fire Emblem Wiki. They have practically 0 articles relating to manga for Fire Emblem, and with videos from creators like Pavis regarding Fire Emblem manga, I would have assumed there would have been something? But when the Fandom Wiki has more articles and actual information, it becomes a problem when many communities have spoken about moving away from said Fandom Wikis. If you want people to move from them in a natural way, other than just somehow being at the top of the search page of Google, because that's a whole other bag of worms, having just as much information or more than these sites will help keep us using them, rather than me just using the Fandom Wiki instead to help find even just a smidgen of info regarding stuff like this. I just felt like this was worth pointing out, so that we as a community can work together to bring more information about the Fire Emblem manga to the fans who may want a summary or learn more about it before diving into one. But all that said, that is all for this video. I hope this convinced you to check out the Fates manga, and if you like stuff like this, please give a like, subscribe, and comment down below your thoughts on the Fates manga, or just Fire Emblem in general. I read pretty much every comment, and I love hearing what people think of the series. But for now, I guess I'll be seeing you guys sometime soon. Bye, Pia!